What is going on, RotoGrinders? It's the NFL Pick 6 show once again with your host, Dean. That's Dean78904. If you want to get all technical on me in the DFS circles, joined again, usual suspects, Rich Hribar, you know him from Sharp Football Analysis, John Daigle from Parts Unknown this week. I'm not really sure exactly. He works for Roto World. Daigle, where are we coming from? Every single week it's a new adventure with you. Where are we popping up here?
It's still Fort Worth, Dallas area. There's just a lot of moving pieces this time around. I'm currently sitting on the ground in front of a fireplace, and it's week 14. That tells you how life is going right now.
It's a good Tinder date.
There you go, man. Hey, the night is young.
Capture this photo right here.
Rich Hribar, Sharp Football Analysis. Rich, we've officially hit the quarter pole. Week 14, season long, I believe. Is this the first week season long people are playing their playoffs? Is that how that goes down? I don't really play much season long. One team, it's gone. It's no longer. It's Dunzo, unfortunately.
Yeah, for the most part, this is where everything takes off. FFPC regular season's just ended too, so it's pretty much playoff time for these next 3 weeks for everybody in season-long leagues. If you happen to lose in your season-long league, I mean, listen, come play some DFS. That's why we're here. So definitely come over.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a thing. I don't know if that's a thing. If anybody has any sort of documentation on it. I think they did a couple of years ago where the most popular slate ever was Thanksgiving, which kind of sort of makes sense, I suppose. Everybody's a lot of people are not working and together with people, and they want to get away from people as well too, I suppose. But all right, let's move on. Let's talk about. Hey, this is what we do on the show, the NFL Pick 6 show. If you guys are not aware, we focus on three main games. We'll talk about those three main games from all sorts of perspective, and then we kind of circle back and talk about our favorite plays we didn't cover in those three main games, position by position, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, even some tight ends. Sure, why not? The three main games we're focusing on this week. It's interesting. We didn't pick the highest team total, but for good reason, I think. We'll talk about it as we talk about the we kind of branch out and move on. But the Green Bay-Detroit game is the biggest total on the board, 55. But we did, Rich, I believe you made the selections this week. We focused on Minnesota at Tampa. That's our appetizer game, Minnesota at Tampa. 6.5 is the total. Tampa Bay is favored. 51.5 is the total here. Dalvin Cook, we've been playing a lot recently. Super expensive, obviously not a great matchup here. Superior receivers in this game, kind of hard to pick which ones are going to be the places to go on the Tampa Bay side. But let's kind of dig into it. Rich, why did you pick this game? I know why, but just tell the people that aren't aware.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the better games on the slate. I mean, try to pick try to at least throw one oddball in there instead of just go down the three highest game totals. And when we're talking about the Packers, it's pretty basic anyways. Not that the Vikings aren't very basic themselves, but this looks like a fun game. Got the Bucs coming out of the bye. The Vikings passing game has been really good the past month. Not only has the Vikings been direct leverage off of the expensive Dalvin Cook and the hot Dalvin Cook for the past month, this week, I mean, it could be inversed. I mean, I don't think Dalvin Cook will be as popular as he's been in recent weeks due to, the price, some of his performance, and the matchup. Paying for Dalvin Cook top dollar has not really paid off the past 2 weeks. He had a really solid game last week and got stoned at the goal line, multiple times last week. And he had a fumble at the goal line. They tried to get him a touchdown in overtime to just seal the game, and we all would have loved it. But if you look at, 3 of his past 4 games, he's been under 3.5 yards per carry. The receptions have gone up at least, and that's what we're looking at for here, against this Tampa Bay Buccaneers run defense that has been pretty consistent throughout the year and dating back to last year and kind of stoning running backs. The most individual rushing yards they've allowed to a running back in a game so far this season is 59. So I mean, it's not like we're looking for a high ceiling here at top dollar at these prices. You can hit value and in a season long league, you're not going to bench Dalvin Cook, but to say he has a chance to go for 35, probably in the lower end of probability. He's had a pretty light schedule so far to date. The highest team he's faced in rushing points allowed per game is the Indianapolis Colts, who are at 10th. So he's had a really light road, and it's going to get tougher here down these last few games for him. But he's actually probably the inverse leverage because this Bucs passing off defense has not been good. We talked about it a couple weeks ago when they played the Chiefs, but since they had that big breakout and just crushed Aaron Rodgers basically in what was a primetime game because there's only 2 4:00 games on that slate. They've been 26th in the NFL in yards allowed per pass play. They have been giving it up through the air, and Kirk Cousins has been playing really, really great, almost 300 yards in 4 straight games, 292 falling just short. And he's done it against a couple of decent, good deep pass defense. Well, I think we thought the Bears were good, and now that they're starting to show some chinks in the armor this past month, if you're worried about Deshaun Watson too. But that's kind of where we're starting, is that this is probably an inverse of what we've seen and how we've handled the Vikings the past few weeks, where we've used the passing game as leverage off Dalvin Cook, and now the passing game looks to be the most appealing part of the offense.
Yeah, Daigle, what are your thoughts here as far as the Minnesota side? You can kind of branch out as far as the receivers too, which we'll focus on as well. Like Dalvin Cook's a great play. Obviously, if you're playing in season long, you play him in your season long team. But we live in the world with salary cap, and he's super expensive. The matchup's not great, and you got to make things work. And as of right now, we're recording this on a Wednesday night. There's not a lot of value out there. Not a ton of value that I like. Things may change. We know how the season's gone. There's definitely, stay tuned and all that. But I don't know how easy it is to get Cook into a lineup right now. You can certainly make it work, but it's going to cost you. And what's that opportunity cost? And of course, there's a guy similar price, Derrick Henry, who, yes, he's coming off a bad week, and we'll talk about him, of course, when we get in the breakdown as far as running backs specifically. But on paper, it looks like a better matchup, of course. Daigle, your thoughts as far as Cook, if you feel want to expand on that, or talk about the quarterback situation, and then obviously the receivers. Is it Thielen? Is it Jefferson? Is it both? How do we know?
I actually had Thielen and Jefferson in my lineup until Saturday when I pivoted to Dalvin Cook, if only because of the Alexander Mattison news. Because, of course, his floor was risen without Alexander Mattison. That's exactly what we saw. Career high 32 carries, career high 38 touches. So his floor is obviously extremely high, especially now that he also has a higher target floor, as Reed mentioned, in the past 2 games. Again, this is still a terrific spot for Kirk Cousins and both receivers overall. We mentioned prior to the Bucs bye how this secondary has become more of a pass funnel in recent weeks, 5-game stretch now. And that's exactly what happened for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense. Just absolutely doused him for 460 yards, 3 touchdowns. And I think we can expect the same through the air for the Vikings, especially if we project them to have trouble on the ground. Adam Thielen, 71 targets now to Justin Jefferson, 65 in the 7 games they played together since week 3. Thielen still with 12 more red zone targets in those games, 11 more end zone targets than Jefferson. But clearly, you can't go wrong with either one. The leverage actually in 2 of the last 3 games, so the 2 games that Jefferson and Thielen have played together over the last 3 weeks, has been to roster Cook and Thielen and/or Jefferson without Kirk Cousins as unique exposure to guys, as the dog just ran right into the wall, as unique exposure to guys to high-scoring offenses. So I think that's in play again, Thielen and Cook, perhaps without Cousins. But honestly, I will be on Cousins, Thielen, and Jefferson because this double stack is one of my favorites of the entire slate.
Yeah, Rich, traditionally, like one of our thoughts with Minnesota is like, oh no, what if they get ahead and they throw the ball like 17 times? But Vegas is telling us the game script's going to be they're going to be behind against Tampa. Tampa pass funnel as well too. So you feel a little more confident as far as Cousins chucking the ball. And of course that it's a really narrow tree. Thielen and Jefferson get so much of that action. Thielen, Jefferson, who do you prefer amongst those two? I know they're both really good options. Can you pick one if you can only have to pick one?
I think if I had to pick one, because we're talking about game stacks and game blocks, it'd be Jefferson. He's getting those downfield targets, those chance to really pop and have a huge yardage game, and he's starting to get end zone targets the past few weeks. But he's just running so hot on downfield targets, and he's been due regression all year in that category. I just don't know when it's going to come or if it even comes this year. I mean, in terms of in deep ball targets, I mean, he's caught 70% of his targets over 15 yards downfield, and he's 4th in the NFL at 30 of those targets. It's really insane the amount of efficiency he's had on those downfield targets. To get those big high scoring weeks, those 100-yard games, he's flirting more with a little bit more with the bonus. Thielen's had a little more been saved by touchdowns. I don't know if save's the right word because he gets a ton of end zone targets. But if you look at his yardage totals, they have been kind of had more down weeks of late than Jefferson's. But I think you can play them both together. They're both getting the ball. That's where the ball is going. It's not going to anyone else in this offense. As we learned from playing Kyle Rudolph again last week. We went one too many weeks with Kyle Rudolph. We were taking our free square and we got goose egg last week. But those are the 2 guys that are getting the rock, and the plays are getting called. That's what's great about Minnesota, and we always like to play them because it's a very concentrated offense. We know where the ball is going pretty much on 70% of the plays.
All right, John, this is the tougher question. The receivers for Tampa Bay, good options, obviously. Brown, Godwin, Evans. Who's going to show me the money this week? Who do we lock in? Who do we feel most comfortable about? Evans, big touchdown equity, but that's kind of sort of basically all he gets. Do we trust any of them? Do we just kind of throw darts and hope one of them works? Is anybody kind of stand out for you on the tip-based side? Big total, 29.
We've seen 4 games now since Antonio Brown joined the team. And Mike Evans still has a team-high 21% target share, 35 targets to Chris Godwin's 31, and Antonio Brown's 29 in that time. Much like Thielen, though, Evans is just getting jammed inside the red zone. They're not even looking to anyone else. 16 total red zone targets and end zone targets compared to Godwin's and Brown's combined 2, and they don't have a single end zone target in that month-long stretch. Again, this is a terrific spot for Tom Brady. Don't have to worry about him falling asleep in a primetime game. Also, the Vikings defense, if you want to know how they're doing, just look to Yannick Ngakoue, who got traded in Week 6, and he still has a sack and a half more than anyone else on defense. Eric Kendricks, who popped off the tape last week, pretty much their only playmaker, injured as well midweek, so we have to watch his practice reports. So I think it's a terrific spot for all through the air again.
Rich, what are our thoughts as far as the receivers? And there was some, stop me if you heard this before, there was some positive coach speak to get, I think, was it Ronald Jones the ball, right? Do we believe that? Is that going to happen? Is he clearly the guy over Fournette? Is he one fumble away to not being the guy? McCoy is still lurking to some degree. I guess he's a live body, but the Tampa Bay offense, again, they're projected for 29, and it's not like Minnesota where it's kind of super easy. You're like, well, we know where the points are going to go. Tampa a little trickier. Your thoughts as far as the receivers and then branch out to that running back situation. Is Ronald, like Arians, is he going to get him the ball? He said he would, and he never lied on record to my knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, Daigle hit on it. This is a good spot. I think that the Vikings defense is starting to get a little credit. I've seen a couple of tweets out there talking about their DVOA of late and their defensive DVOA, which does take into account, opponents. But look at since week 8, they have faced Matthew Stafford. He was injured during the game, and Chase Daniel finished. Nick Foles, Andy Dalton, Teddy Bridgewater, and Mike Glennon over that stretch. And I mean, listen, Mike Glennon and Andy Dalton took them to the limit. I mean, they flat out lost to the Cowboys. So, I mean, I still have trouble giving this defense really any credit. They don't pressure the quarterback on any level. Their young corners have played a little bit better, but they're not guys we're scared of, especially not with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown. Like, we are not moving off of those guys for that unit of Cameron Dantzler. We're not. Even if those guys are playing a little bit better, we probably buried them as rookies and saying they had no chance early, but we're not worried, and I don't think that this is a very particularly great defense either. The run game's a little trickier. I mean, I think we have the run game kind of figured out, or this backfield split. For whatever reason, Leonard Fournette is the passing down back. He is the actual passing down back. Now, the rationale behind that, I think we can question, but that's what we know. Every week, at least for this period of the last several weeks, he's the passing down back. They're going to start Ronald Jones. If game script allows them to stay with the run and Ronald Jones is running hot, they keep giving Ronald Jones carries. Now, typically, something has happened where they've fallen behind or Ronald Jones has done something dumb and they've gone away from that. And, and he hasn't gotten those carries. But there is no way that if you could watch I'll be a TV watcher guy here, that if you've watched a Bucs game in the past 5 or 6 weeks and seen the difference of when Ronald Jones touches the football compared to Leonard Fournette, there's no reason Leonard Fournette should be on the football field, really at any level. I'm pretty flabbergasted by this role he's in, and that they keep side parking Ronald Jones. I mean, he made 2 phenomenal plays in that Chiefs game, really got them started on that that long catch and run for a touchdown. Later on, he had a long run in the run game. Leonard Fournette's not giving you any of those splash plays. Like, where are those? But I mean, they're almost touchdown home favorites here against a bad defense. I don't know really where you grasp it. The only guy that's shown any type of upside, though, is Ronald Jones, but they're tough plays. I also think Gronk's a pretty good play because Daigle hit on it with Eric Kendricks, this injury. If Eric Kendricks is going to be out, Gronk's kind of flashed a little bit for us, obviously before the bye. He had his first 100-yard game since 2018. He's given us a little bit, and he's the one guy, he gets both end zone targets and downfield targets. They give him vertical targets in the offense, which they didn't do with O.J. Howard last year, which was pretty frustrating. But I think Gronk is a pretty intriguing play in this game.
Yeah, Jones had that 37-yard touchdown catch in the first half, the Bucs' only first half touchdown, and then saw 1 target the rest of the game. He had a 34-yard run in the third quarter, didn't get a single carry the rest of the game. And then Bruce Arians comes out on Monday and says Ronald Jones needs to have 20 touches. There's only one person in charge of that, and it's the man saying he needs to give Ronald Jones 20 touches. So we've seen this many times throughout the years, not just with Ronald Jones. You go all the way back to who was the pass-catching running back they had? Andre Ellington. We've seen this before. So I don't believe him, but Ronald Jones would obviously be the play over Leonard Fournette if you're trying to leverage the passing game and just trying to get touchdown equity.
Yeah, and if you think the game's going to go the way it's going to go, play Jones with Cousins and Thielen, Jefferson, or both, something like that, and have at it. Seems like a pretty good way to start a lineup. All right, let's move on. Unless you guys have anything else as far as this game, or shall I move on?
Go for it.
Roll it. I'll say Gronk. By the way, he's rested. He had old man Gronk's been climbing as the season progressed, and he's coming off a bye week, so I don't mind Gronk either. As if you don't have the funds for something like Kelsey or Waller, I don't mind a Gronk. He's sort of there in the mid tier as far as the asking price. Next game, Tennessee, Jacksonville. Jacksonville at home getting 7 points. 53 is the total. And we did mention Derrick Henry. This is kind of one of the direct pivots off of Cook. We saw last week he got game scripted out of that game, Hribar, but we don't expect that's going to happen this time. They were down 3-4 touchdowns at halftime. It was an absolute disaster. They didn't come back. The offense, via the pass. Henry, basically kicked off the field more or less when they're on the comeback like that. But that's probably not going to be the situation this week. But Jacksonville, 7-point favorites, 30-point team total. How much do we prioritize Henry? And is Henry just a flat-out better play than Dalvin Cook?
Yeah, so they were down 38-3. It was the first game all season that we've kind of seen game script actually impact Derrick Henry. They've had losses so far this season, but down 38-3 at the half is really going to put a bind in what Derrick Henry's game is all about. And we've seen him kind of his season low 16 touches. Now, the Jaguars have only led for 9.6% of their snaps this season. It's the lowest rate in the NFL. They've led for a lower rate of their snaps than the Jets this season. Game script is definitely going to be it swung inversely from where it was last week, and they are 7-point favorites. But I do think Jacksonville, obviously, they've shown Jacksonville will hang around. Like, they'll punch with teams. And this Tennessee defense is trash. So, there's going to be points scored, I think, on the Jacksonville side, too. But, yeah, it's a great spot. Remember, there was a point early in the year where these teams played in week two, yeah. And it was a Derrick Henry week, I think. And then Jacksonville actually stepped up and held him 84 yards on 25 touches. It was one of those games where Henry didn't get a touchdown, and everyone played him. He was 9K, and he just got held the bag. But this Jaguars defense has lost so many pieces along the way. I just don't know how they hold up. I mean, they've allowed 140 rushing yards and 5.2 yards per carry to backs over their past 3 games on average. They are just getting kind of just beat up. On the back end, they just have no healthy cornerbacks. I mean, C.J. Henderson and DJ Hayden both are still out. We were waiting word on Sidney Jones, who hasn't played in 3 games. They just can't stop anyone through the air. And they can't stop anyone on the ground either. So we've got Derrick Henry in this spot where he's probably the chalkiest of the guys I think people will click on. We've obviously run through the gambit of if he doesn't catch passes, if he doesn't score a touchdown, this is what you get. Everyone knows that when they pick his name. But people are going to not be able to fit in this passing game, and they're in another great leverage spot again because I talked about that secondary. I mean, they've allowed multiple receivers to have more than 15 PPR points in 4 of their past 5 games. We've seen Corey Davis kind of pop last week. We talked about him on the show. He was the only GPP play I got right last week to just kind of float me by. But and now in their full games that played with AJ Brown this season, I mean, he has more targets, more receptions, more yards than AJ Brown. The only thing he's lagged behind is those touchdowns because AJ Brown kind of creates his own touchdowns and he's a touchdown scorer. But this is kind of who I thought Davis was coming out as a prospect. I mean, he came out in a weird year where there wasn't a lot of alpha prospects. He was elevated up to 5th in the draft, which is probably. But he's a guy that is built like a tweener. He's a guy that's meant to be like a 1B and play next to a big time receiver. And now that AJ Brown is elevated into that, we've seen Corey Davis just take off this season in a contract year too. So make it a little tough for them to bring him back. But I think this passing game is high leverage. We didn't even talk about Tannehill, but this passing game is high leverage spot again.
Yeah, it's hard to see where it's going to shuffle out as far as lineups. Again, on Wednesday, you don't really know as far as ownership and all that. But I'm curious, what are people going to first do, John? John, your instinct on Wednesday night, obviously. Do you first want to play Henry, or do you first want to play Tannehill with Corey Davis or A.J. Brown?
Tannehill for me, honestly. I think they're both tremendous spots. Reeves pretty much broke it down, but we've seen Jags front seven while their secondary is falling apart. They've been pretty good. Of course, they got road graded by Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt with Wyatt Teller back in the lineup, but held Aaron Jones under 50 yards. It took Dalvin Cook 32 carries to get over 100 last week, and even then he averaged 3.7 yards per carry. So the Jags front seven is a little more respectable still than we think. Having said that, you do want to attack them through the air. Tannehill, even last week, we talked about how much we loved his spot. And I play all the mid-stake single entries, and he was only 7% rostered. Anthony Ferkser came in at 20, like shockingly 25 to 30%. Did not expect that. And then, of course, A.J. Brown slightly higher owned than Corey Davis, who was a tremendous play as well. So, yeah, I think it's another spot where everyone will jam in Derrick Henry and everyone will look past Ryan Tannehill. So, of course, I'm absolutely all for this. And then I think you can safely run it back as well, because not only have the Titans allowed 31 points on average in their last 4 games, but Mike Glennon, of course, not the best option, but he's throwing them in. He's at least chunking it deep. And they're not always there. They're not always good being chunked deep, but still a league-high 16 pass attempts, 20-plus yards downfield in his last 2 starts. DJ Shark, of course, quietly ran a team-high 44 routes on his 48 dropbacks last week, despite really not getting there in the box score until the 4th quarter, and even then he didn't exceed our expectations. So I like running it back with DJ Shark as well, because the Titans, like the Jaguars, are riddled with injuries, and they're just offering no pass rush whatsoever. So I think Glenn will actually have time to stand back there and chunk it deep as well.
He's a man of his word, Glenn, and he's not particularly great, but he's like, look, I don't know how much longer I'm going to get to play, and I'm going to go back there and I'm going to chuck, and I'm just going to, see what happens. And that's what he's doing. Not spectacularly, not successfully, not efficiently, but he's going to do it. And his receivers are all cheap. By the way, let's go ahead. The chat's asking me if I flex. It's only because it pertains to the conversation. If I flexed on my Yahoo one last week, I did not mention it, but Yahoo was very good to me. And I did not listen to you, Rich. I won a GPP on Yahoo with not Corey Davis, but the Tannehill A.J. Brown combination. Somehow I still got there. I picked the wrong guy. But good call.
I'll also say that Mike Glennon was in some of the super high stakes league-winning tournament lineups because how low his salary was allowed people to then pay up for other options. I don't think we can sneak that in this week because we have Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. Like, the gang is back now. I don't think you could afford to pay down at quarterback this week. But that was a terrific option last week because we talked about you could take chances at quarterback since we didn't trust any of the higher salary guys last week.
You're going to run it back here, Rich. Who's your favorite run back in the Jacksonville side? Oh, did Rich just freeze up on us? I don't know. John, are you with me?
I am. I'm here.
I thought the smart money was on you freezing and not Rich.
I agree.
The video I was looking at earlier.
And meanwhile, my video and audio are great now. I don't know what's happening. I have no idea.
I don't know what's going on. I'm checking out the video now, and it appears, well, I see Rich, and it looks like he is Rich. No, he is frozen. There you go. All right, well, we will power through, and we will move on. So Chark, Chenault, I think those are the 2 best options. James Robinson still goes out there and does this thing every single week with an absolute incredible, amount of workload. Captain of teams, running backs don't matter. Undrafted free agent. I think he's going to break a record amongst all undrafted free agents, like very, very quickly for total yards. The asking price is up there, though, right, John? So it's going to be costly, but he's basically game script proof. He's going to be out there no matter what. Not big, sexy chunk plays, but he just gets there through volume. I guess you can run it back on that side. It doesn't really make sense.
I think he's good leverage. I think he's good leverage off Derrick Henry, honestly, because if you're going to double stack Tannehill again, why not leverage the running back that cost nearly next to Derrick Henry and playing James Robinson? So that seems like a unique way to attack this game. And again, we love this game. The second highest total. The Titans also have the second highest team total like last week, only behind the Seahawks? No, behind the Packers, who we'll talk about later on in the show as well, assuming Rich is back. So, of course, James Robinson, 24 and 27 touches, I believe, the past 2 games. No one even coming close to competing with his workload. So, yeah, I mean, DJ Shark and James Robinson, I'm not sure which way I'd go. Maybe it would be James Robinson. I think I just kind of convinced myself into that with a Tannehill double stack. But, yeah, I love the entire game environment here.
It just feels like playing the game backwards, but it's not wrong because, like, Tennessee can absolutely win this game by 7 or by 3 or by 10. And like, all those guys are kind of getting what they're supposed to get. But in theory, like you're supposed to play the Jacksonville guys, the receivers and the Tennessee running back, right? But also, how does Tennessee get that score? How do they get that lead? Potentially via the air with Tannehill and Brown-Davis combinations. I see some movement. Is Rich back with us?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the story is, man. Things are running fine. We switched to this program a few weeks ago for whatever reason. I don't know if it was Cal's call or Cam's call or Dan's call in the background. I got to throw this under the bus. This program is trash. I don't know who's sponsoring this. We've had nothing but problems between me and Daigle since we switched to this program.
Stop blaming me. I swear to you, it's not just on my end. I'm trying here.
All I do is go on shows all week, and this is the only one that is there's an issue with.
It's a weekly adventure. I will say that.
Rich, you have anything that you didn't get in as far as I know you have a bunch of stuff on all your numbers as far as Tennessee Jacksonville you want to fire off before I move on?
Well, I just think I don't know if you guys talked about it. DJ Shark is just way too cheap this week, and I understand some of the performance warrants it. But if you watch that game last week, I mean, he had multiple opportunities to have a huge game, and Glennon just airmailed so many throws. Even that last interception in overtime, DJ Shark's wide open. Like that's a throw like 80% of quarterbacks in the NFL hit. But if you look at Sharks in the games he's played, he's dominated targets, weighted opportunity, air yards, everything. He's 59 and 53 on both sites this week. I think he's the clear run back guy outside of the obvious, tried and true James Robinson train.
Yeah, I haven't said hello yet to the chat. What's up, chat? Hey, YouTube. Feel free to like and subscribe, turn on the notifications and all that. Myself and John are going to be on Sunday, 3 hours before lock. We take you guys, we're just the start of 3 hours of content talking about the NFL. Obviously we'll have more information at the time, the DFS slate. And, for showdown content, for basketball content, which is around the corner. And, hey, if you want to get actual, on the site content, there's a link that's been dropped in the chat by our fabulous multitasking producer, D-Train Devon's all over it. Get yourself $5 off the Core 4 basketball, football, baseball, and golf. All right. Final game, Atlanta, as far as the three we're going to focus on, then we'll kind of branch out from there and have a bigger conversation as far as the slate, position by position. Atlanta at the Chargers, 49 is the total. The Chargers are I don't have anybody's favorite. This is going to be a tie, right? Neither one of these teams can actually win per the rules of the Falcons and the Chargers. Daigle, opening thoughts as far as this game.
The moment that Saints-Falcons game ended, I was like, okay, who do the Falcons play next week? Because that seems like a really good bounce-back spot. And I saw they played the Chargers. It's like, okay, I really like where we're heading here. Because the Falcons showing didn't seem impressive, of course, with 16 points. But that was actually the most that Saints defense we talked about, which have been nightmarish, has allowed in the past 5 games, 16 points. And now you look at what the Chargers are doing defense the last month. Yes, they have allowed the fewest passing yards in that span, but they've also played minimal league average competition there. And still 29 points allowed to the Dolphins with Tua under center, 28 to Joe Flacco, and the Jets. And then, of course, the Patriots did score special teams and defensive touchdowns, but still 45 points to the Patriots is pretty insane. So whether it's Matt Ryan – well, not whether. We know what it is. It's Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley. We were concerned about Julio Jones' injury in his first game back, but all he did was show up, and he played 94% of their snaps, which was actually his highest rate since Week 10 of the 2018 season. He's out-targeted Calvin Ridley 63-49, and there's 7 full and healthy games together this year. But Ridley's still getting there in that span because he has 6 touchdowns to Julio's 3 in their games together. So I think it's a terrific double stack to get right back on this Falcons passing attack where we know the targets are going against a Chargers defense I don't respect.
All right, Rich, make the call here. Ridley or Julio, or both?
Yeah, I mean, I love both. It's the same thing with the Vikings. This is where the ball is. This team can't run. They can't run the football at all. And that's like what you want to kind of do on the Chargers, and it doesn't matter. Like they just cannot do it, man. They can't run the football on any level. Todd Gurley looks like he's pretty much done. I saw Pat Doherty tweet, like, it wouldn't be shocking, like, if like, Todd Gurley's not even on the team next year, right? Like, at this point, like, how crazy would that be? Like, if he's, like, because, I mean, right now, he's got nothing. He's got nothing left.
He's the world's oldest 26-year-old. He's only 26. Right,
yeah. But he was phenomenal. Like, the guy was amazing. And, for 2 years there and, like, couldn't be stopped and looked like he was going to be, like, a dynasty RB1 for, like, a good pocket. And, like, it's just gone. I mean, it's wild. Even like the last 2 years where he still like had some fantasy points, it's just from falling in the end zone. Like, when is the last like Todd Gurley like splash play you can recall? Like,
he was out snapped by Ito Smith. That tells you everything you need to know.
I mean, he's just sapped, man. It's sad. It's sad. It's sad on all accounts. But I mean, as far as this offense is going to operate, like, they are pigeonholed into just dropping back to throw and throwing to two players, pretty much. So I mean, you can play both these guys, similar to like the Viking situation, except for there's no Dalvin Cook. So yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why you can't play those guys. Julio, like, no one wants to play him either, because obviously this season is like the super death tilt of Julio. He's had the hamstrings had multiple times it's popped up. Will he finish a game? But in his games that he's made it through full, his 7 games, he's averaging 6.5 catches for 100 yards per game. Like, he's performing. He just, you have to run that gambit of, is Julio going to make it through this, man? Is he going to get through this game? But yeah, and in Calvin Ridley, all he does is lead the league in air yards per game. So, I mean, what we're getting here. I think it's intriguing on the run back side. Obviously, anytime you have a team get shut out, it's interesting to kind of look at them and see if they're going to have depressed ownership or people are jumping off the train. Herbert was a guy that started with so much. He just started so hot in the most fantasy points ever through 9 starts. There was bound to be some regression, especially in his under pressure, stats. But I also don't think that there's, anything when you look at this. His two biggest down games came against Bill Belichick, who is completely squashed rookie quarterbacks over his entire tenure with the Patriots. And then Brian Flores, a, Bill Belichick disciple. So, I mean, I don't think that there's really, there's something there that those two teams really kind of gave him the most trouble and showed him a lot of blitzes and a lot of trouble. I mean, they had 3.6 yards per play last week. It was their lowest in a game. They didn't even have a shot. Like, there was even a point where you thought, like, well, here comes the Chargers garbage time. Like, they had nothing in that game. Belichick and the Patriots really kind of just had them under their thumb. Now we got a Falcons defense that have kind of like at least brought some skepticism to people because they just nuked Derek Carr 2 weeks ago. And then they've had 2 Taysom Hill sandwich games, but in one of the Taysom Hill games, they allowed 10 yards per pass attempt, and then they gave up the 2 touchdowns. And guys were just still running free last week. I would have thrown that touchdown to Traquan Smith last week, like pretty easily. I think that's about my limit. I'll max out about 25 air yards, but I would have got that one to him. There's no one guarding him. And then the Jared Cook touchdown, they just let him run, across, like just a slant in front of everybody. I mean, these are easy completions that they're allowing to a guy that's made 3 starts in the NFL and 2 have been against them. So, I mean, it could be a good spot to go right back to Herbert, a guy that everyone was playing for 2 months solid. And now all of a sudden it's like, I don't know. And then, obviously Keenan Allen's in a great spot, against wide receiver ones, against that Atlanta defense. They're 26th in points allowed per game to those wide receiver ones. His target shares come down a little bit with Eckler returning, but the raw targets have been there. But I think that this game is interesting on a lot of levels. One, because like I said, the guy that I think you should play, Julio Jones, no one wants to play. And then this team that just got shut out, are people going to go back to them?
All right, John, Eckler, Keenan Allen. Can we just throw out the whole Charger game last week and just forget, like, pretend like it didn't happen? Like, obviously Herbert, you could say Ricky Wall, you can say, Belichick is super, super smart and just kind of outsmarted him. And, Herbert obviously overachieved to some extent at the start of the year. But now facing Atlanta, is this a prime spot to exploit? It is kind of weird that they're dogs here versus Atlanta, but you kind of talked about that as well. Anthony
Lynn.
Well, oh, man. He's going to be gone, right? I'm assuming he's going to be gone?
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't think so.
All right, fair enough. I mean, he's not going to be hanging out with Greg Williams? Do we have any thoughts on that, by the way? Was that how intentional? Scale of 1 to 10? Any conspiracy theorists out there?
0 for me. I say no conspiracy. I think it's just Greg, man. I think he tried to dial it up.
He was the DC of the last 0-16 team. Like, of course, like how do you become 0-16? You make bad plays, of course. So yeah, it makes total sense what he did, according to him, anyways.
I would just say
he didn't do it the play before. The play before they dropped back into shell coverage, and Aguilar should have scored. Aguilar beat the zone and should have scored on a good throw, and then he saw that and was probably like, "We can't let that happen again. I'm gonna send some heat." And it was jailbreaks. I mean, it was more or less like not only was the call bad, but to put an undrafted cornerback on a guy that ran a 4.27 and then to have that player just not have the wherewithal to understand like that double move doesn't mean anything. Like you can't like let him catch that comeback if he's running it. It was just disaster on a lot of fronts. But I do not think that there was a tank because what incentive did Greg Williams have to tank? He's not going to be there next year regardless.
Exactly. Yeah. Or even a corner, like the undrafted corner wants to stick around. He doesn't want that on tape. Right. Like, why is he going to play along? Like, he's not tanking. Just,
players don't tank. Like, players aren't tanking, period. They genuinely tried to win that game.
Yeah, I just think we all forgot. Well, we didn't, but a lot of people, big-time media, forgot how bad of a defensive coordinator he is. Like, it's that simple. That's pretty much the thing that happens every week. But since it happened in the national spotlight with the team trying to win its first game, that's why it was emphasized. But that's what Greg Williams does literally every single week. Not shocking at all.
Will another team hire Greg Williams as their DC at any point ever again?
I mean, I hope not. But it's the NFL. Like, let's not rule it out. Mike Nolan is coaching again.
Yeah.
Like, let's not rule anything out.
Stop rehashing all these coaches.
Adam Gase will coach again, too. Wherever he goes, Adam Gase will definitely get hired.
Some new blood. All right. I derailed the conversation. I apologize.
Eckler.
Your thoughts on the Chargers?
On Eckler. So 2 weeks ago, 25 of 34 running back touches for that team. Kalen Ballage comes back this week. And on the surface, you don't think much of it. You think blowout, Eckler's 12 touches to Kalen Ballage's 10, no big deal. But Ballage out-touched Eckler 3-2 on the opening drive. Like, it was obviously a competitive game. Anthony Lynn still went to Ballage to split touches with Eckler. Having said that, should we value a running back who now has 25 targets over the past 2 weeks? Of course. That is probably my favorite run back still. But it's crazy to think that Ballage won't be involved here. Lynn loves him. Remember, he had 20-plus touches in 3 consecutive games there while Justin Jackson was out. Joshua Kelly also DNP on Wednesday on the injury report as well. So I think that even if Ballage is involved, if Josh Kelly's out, that still opens up a little more opportunity for Eckler. So if everyone's scared because of Ballage, I still think it's a terrific spot for him.
All right. We got anything else this game, Rich, or shall we move on and break it down position by position and on some guys we've not talked about as far as their teams?
Nope. Let it fly.
All right, Rich, and we keep talking about Aaron Rodgers every single week, and I just, as a general rule, I want the quarterbacks that have legs, but if my quarterback is going to insist on throwing the ball 17 times in a row on the 1 yard line because he really wants the baddest stats, he cares about your fantasy team, he cares about his stats, he cares about his legacy. Eddie's facing the Lions in Detroit with, I think, the highest team total on the board, the highest game total on the board. Aaron Rodgers, like, how do I not roster him? He's amazing this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to pay for it. To be fair to Aaron Rodgers, he also leads the NFL in fantasy points on throws over 15 yards downfield, too. So, I mean, he's getting it done in all ways. And that's regression. I mean, you look at them, they were 28th in the NFL in run touchdown rate to passing touchdown rate last year. I mean, that's how regression swings, man, with things like this. They're throwing more aggressively near the goal line than they were a year ago when everyone was complaining Aaron Jones is scoring every touchdown. That's how it works, man. This is how it goes sometimes. But, yeah, I mean, great spot against the Lions. They're horrible. You've got the team that's the best at scoring touchdowns against the team that's the worst at preventing touchdowns. 75% of Green Bay scoring plays have been touchdowns. It's the highest rate in the league. And 77% of the scoring plays allowed by the Lions have been touchdowns. So Teams aren't kicking field goals against them, and the Packers aren't kicking field goals themselves. If they're scoring, it's typically them, putting in the paint. Obviously, you got to pay for it. Russ isn't. If anyone needs a slump buster, this is it. It's teed up for Russ here against this Jets team that we just talked about and their new defensive coordinator. Maybe we would like Greg still to be there, but
will Carroll let him do it though? Is the question. Will Carroll unleash him? And how much does he actually have to do because it's the Jets?
The Jets run defense is actually pretty good. I think we glossed over it because Booker wasn't for sure the starter on the show on Wednesday. But, I mean, the Jets have allowed, 100-yard rusher since week 4 and 1 rushing touchdown to a back over the past 6 games. They're a good run defense, and they've been a good run defense for a couple of years, and they're a bad pass defense. So I do think that there will be some cooking again in this game for Russell Wilson and this offense in general, because, I mean, they faced a pretty good run of good defenses here, especially from the DK Metcalf stance. I mean, DK Metcalf has run a gauntlet where he's faced Tre'Davious White, Jalen Ramsey, Patrick Peterson, Darius Slay, and James Bradbury his past 5 games. This is going to be like a Corona commercial for him. Like put him in a kimono and he's gonna be on the beach in this game. Like, and he still produced over that stretch of games. Like, this is gonna be a candy, matchup for him. Kid in a toy store. But before let's turn over Daigle, like, we gotta talk at least about, for this slate as it pertains to his pricing, Jalen Hurts, to where he's priced on both sites. Because obviously it's a tough matchup. You've got a team that's allowed 44 total points their past 5 games. The Saints defense are doing their thing, like where they suck for the first 6 weeks and then they finish the year like an absolute rampage. But we have a guy this cheap that really has potential to have an unknown ceiling because he can run. And he can, not only can he run, he can throw a little bit too. So there's that dual, like, kind of Konami upside here for a guy that's 5'1" on DK and I think 6'6" on FanDuel. This guy ran for 3,300 yards in college, 90th percentile, athleticism score for a quarterback. And he was a way better passer than like he ever got credit for at 2 like pretty high profile, collegiate programs, although one was the Big 12. But Jalen Hurts offers some upside at his price, and no one's going to really care to play him because of the big bad, wolf that is the Saints defense and the crummy, outcome that has been Philadelphia Eagles, kind of offensive, players so far this season. But man, at that cheap, like, I'm definitely going to take some bites of the apple at Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I like the New Orleans defense, but I also think Hurts is interesting. And I also am a little bit concerned about New Orleans just eating the clock up, just making it a quick game and not giving him many plays. What was the stat I saw? Was it, of course, they were on the comeback, and he played, dropped back 20 times last game. I think he got sacked 3 times for what it's worth. So definitely some upside on that New Orleans side. Did want to mention about what you're talking about, that Jets defense. I pulled it up here on the fly, Football Outsiders, DVOA. They're 7th best against the rush and dead last against the pass. No surprise there. Daigle, any thoughts as far as the quarterbacks you threw out there, as far as Hurts, as far as Rodgers, Wilson? Feel free to add on.
Yeah, it's a lot like Justin Herbert's winning week for DFS that we're 2 weeks removed from now. Like, he played the Jets. He literally flipped the slate on its head, I guess I should say, against the Jets secondary.
Nobody
and Russ is in the same spot this week. Of course, they could use Chris Carson more, so Pete Carroll is insisting he's going to do. Still, though, Russ can get it done, as we've seen time and time again in his career, on efficiency alone. On Hurts, like Reeves said, it is a rough spot, man. Such a tough spot. But it reminds me a lot of Taysom Hill. He took down the millie in his first start because he was stone man. I believe he was 4,500, and no one played him despite the fact he had rushing upside. So, of course, when it comes to prices this cheap, of course they can get there. So I definitely don't mind dabbling with him in tournaments. And then I think we should just mention Patrick Mahomes, not only because he's Patrick Mahomes, not only because he's one of the league's most efficient passers against the blitz, which is what Flores will probably try to do here, but the Dolphins – Tua was afforded a season-high 39 pass attempts last week because he's been more effective in no huddle. And so they went heavy no huddle in the second half. And if they do that and speed up the game again against the Chiefs, like, that puts Mahomes in an even better spot in a game script. So I think Mahomes has it's easy to say Mahomes has a sneaky ceiling, but I think the matchup is a lot better than people think for Mahomes as well.
You mentioned Tua. Does anybody think Tua is an interesting bring back if Kansas City jumps out to a lead, as we presume? If you're playing Hill, if you're playing Kelsey or something like that, and bring him back, with Tua. And I would be so much more excited to play it if it was Fitzpatrick. I really would. But Tua hasn't been asked to do a lot necessarily, but maybe he'll be asked to do more here against Kansas City. Is he interesting in tournaments, Rich, or am I just kind of like trying to make a narrative that probably doesn't exist?
No, I don't think you're offbeat, because the one game that they've had to counterpunch with Tua was the Arizona game, and that was by far his best fantasy game. That was where they were pressed on the scoreboard. So, I mean, I think you are at least in the right, the right ballpark there of, at least he's going to be pressed he's going to have to produce this game.
I assume so. Yeah. You mentioned Arizona, by the way. Are we off on Murray? Is he hurt? Why is he not running the ball anymore? Any thoughts? Anybody?
I mean, we talked about a little. I think my screen went green. Whatever. We talked about a little bit in depth last week, right? How more RPO defense playing him differently. Maybe he's hurt as well. Fewer runs. He's just kind of off my radar for this slate, honestly, which could be a mistake, but I don't think he'll be in my player pool.
Yeah, that's kind of sort of where I'm at right now too. He's one of those scary guys to fade, but You can't play everybody. I suppose you can in theory, but obviously that's not necessarily the way to play. All right. Anything else as far as quarterbacks? Or shall we talk about running backs? I think we're going to move on to running backs. We already talked about the two big boys, Henry and Dalvin Cook. I mean, John, this is where the quote-unquote value kind of appears. And it's, again, on a Wednesday night, these things change. Like one of the Washington guys, potentially, McKissick or Peyton Barber versus San Francisco. I'll give it a slight bump. This game's in Arizona. I like games in the turf in a dome, so that's a little bit more appealing. Obviously, if Washington's on the comeback, McKissick's more appealing. If they're ahead somehow, I guess Barber. But Barber's just like essentially a young Peterson. You want to roster him or a young Frank Gore. Another name that's popping up in optimals on a Wednesday night, which I do not want to play. Who knows if he's going to play anyway? He was banged up last week. Yeah, this is the place where we're supposed to save money. We talked about Miami. Gaskin, still pretty cheap. Super tilting as far as not getting in the end zone. You guys over 17 or something in the red zone. It was not pretty. Montgomery's still plenty cheap and getting plenty of touches. Not sexy. If Swift is back, interesting playing that Green Bay game.
RB1, David Montgomery.
Yeah. I mean, is he 9? Is he 10? Where is he at? I don't know. I assume he's kind of.
No, he was last week. He was the highest scoring running back in fantasy. And CPAT had a touchdown.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that was tilting for me too. But
he has sprinkled in a couple additional cuts into his game the past 2 weeks. Having said that, it's not hard when it's the Packers and Lions, and of course, this is the Texans. So this narrative with Montgomery is definitely going to get overblown in the offseason. Someone's going to mention his broken tackle rate or whatever, and we're going to have to shush them mentioning the matchups. But for the time being, I mean, it sets up really, really well, because no one Patterson is still touching the ball in the backfield.
All right, give me some of your running backs on your list here, Daigle. Again, I don't think it's really sexy, but just kind of sort of guys that are making it work, guys that are getting a decent amount of volume, but the names aren't exactly jumping off the page.
If DeAndre Swift goes, he's probably going to be my most rostered player. Remember the last time we saw him, a season high in snaps, 71% of the team's running back carries, and 5 targets, a 15% target share as the workhorse. If he's healthy, I'm assuming he won't be limited. I guess we'll have to follow tea leaves there. But either way, I can see me stacking him in what you've been mentioning, Dean, is the highest total of the weekend, and also a good leverage or a run back against the Packers. We already mentioned Montgomery. I also like Jonathan Taylor. Again, the Colts schedule just sets up really well here for this fantasy playoff stretch if you're in season long and still do that kind of thing. But really, in the past 2 games that Taylor has played now, because he had that one sandwiched in between when he was on the COVID list, he has out-touched Nyheim Hines 42-18. He did out-snap Nyheim Hines 33-23 on Sunday, and it's looked a little more spry. It probably is also because of matchups, but overall, I think he's running better as well, so I like him a lot. And then, of course, if you don't play Seattle's passing attack, we already mentioned it, the Jets' front seven is spectacular. It's probably not the best play, but we've seen Chris Carson's touch count and usage overall progressively increase every single week. I do believe Pete Carroll won't do the most efficient thing, and he'll just jam Chris Carson to the line. The good news is Chris Carson is still also getting targets now, and so if he's going to handle the lion's share of touches, I think he's a fine touch-based DFS option.
All right, Rich, what do you have for me? But you mentioned the Taylor situation. I just wish – why is Wilkins getting 15% of the snaps? That doesn't sound like much, but that feels like it's directly eating away at Taylor, who wasn't even on the field for more than 50% of the snaps last week. He crushed. He was great, but that was because he was super efficient. Rich, your thoughts as far as the other running backs that are out there we didn't really touch on. Elliott is pretty cheap. Bernard is kind of sort of somewhat interesting. He's $5K. He's facing the terrible Dallas team, so he could be fine. And I still think Gaskin is priced pretty well. Little concerning if they're on the comeback and they're way behind. He's probably not going to be out there. That might yield to Larry's the better catch, catching back. What do you have for me as far as running backs we've yet to talk about?
To see the Colts go with that 4th and 1 call of running Nyheim Hines right up the middle was pretty spectacular too. That felt great. And not using a guy like Jonathan Taylor or just not even making that play call at all. Because we've seen with the Lions try to do the same thing with as good as Montgomery was, just trying to ramrod it for a yard there. But yeah, Montgomery's another good stop. But what we didn't even touch upon the guy that the team that allowed David Montgomery to be the RB1. That happened last week. He's the highest scoring running back. They're playing a guy that they allowed 240 yards and 3 touchdowns to the first time they played. We talked about Rodgers in the passing game. I mean, Aaron Jones the Lions allowed a league high 23 touchdowns to running backs. We've seen it last week. That's why Trubisky, if you stacked him, you didn't get there because he was fine. He played well enough, but all the touchdowns are rushing. The Bears actually had more rushing touchdowns last week than they had all season coming in. They had 2 rushing touchdowns on the year coming into last week's game. 3. Aaron Jones, man, is another. He was in this spot in week 2, and everyone wanted to play the Packers passing game. He was the obvious leverage guy and just absolutely obliterated the Lions. He's in play again. I'm glad you brought up Elliott. Listen, it just makes sense. It does. The guy has 20 touches in 10 of his 12 games. This might be the last time they're favored all season. They're facing a defense that's 31st in yards per carry allowed to running backs. They're 27th in rushing points allowed per game. He just had a really positive game against the pretty solid defense, 95 yards, last night. The touches were there. He got stonewalled at the goal line 3 times, which wasn't great. But, it just makes sense. It's a paper play. It just makes sense. He's going to get a lot of touches as a favorite against a bad defense.
Let me ask you this. Dallas, their season's over. Is it effectively over with the NFC East? I don't really know, to be honest. It's close to over.
No, they're alive still.
Okay, they're still alive. All right.
Yeah,
my question was going to be,
listen, that thing's going to week 17, man. I
thought Washington is like a commanding 1.5 game lead or something. Like maybe the Giants are. I don't know what it is. I don't have a favorite team, so I don't really follow that kind of stuff very closely until the last couple weeks of the season. I still the entire division's a disaster.
Well, and also you have to think too, there's no way Mike McCarthy at this point, they can just give up. He can't.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to ask you to pull back an Elliott a little bit because they have a long-term investment in him, but 70%.
They haven't shown it.
Yeah.
He's out there. Dude, they were down 34 to 10, and they just gave him 3 straight carries from the 1 yard line.
They would have given him 4 if they were allowed. Sure, why not? I can't remember what they called.
And Zeke, it was a 14-day stretch, of course, came after the bye. But Zeke was in the winning tournament lineups in that Minnesota game as the run back because everyone was focusing on Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. No one played Zeke except the tournament winners. So, you're not stacking Brandon Allen, of course, and running it back with Zeke, but I guess he can get there. It's just so disgusting because he's been so bad. So bad.
In the chat, they're talking about Gio. I mentioned Gio's name. They said he's not good at football. That's okay. If you're a running back and you're getting 75% of the snaps and you're facing the Cowboys, and you're cheap. So, okay, whatever. Try your best.
The concern there is Samaj P. Ryan still getting a handful of touches every week. And then they also got Travion Williams mixed in for a couple carries last week as well. But yeah, that would be my only concern. It's clearly
and the Swift one, again, Detroit's playing. Now they're playing for nothing. They're not in a division that's absolutely putrid. Why would you push your one of your future pieces if he's not right? But I guess if he's cleared, I assume he's full go. I don't know, but just I have questions on that. It feels like a weird half measure. It's get the guy 30% of snaps or 40% of snaps. Either he's good or he's not. But stay tuned on that. Hopefully we'll get reports. Did anybody have a thought? I threw them out there just because they're cheap. The Washington backs, I assume Gibson's going to be out with his toe. McKissick, if they're on the chase, he's a guy that can catch 10 balls for 12 yards or maybe more than 12 yards. I don't know. Rich, any interest in McKissick, especially on DK, we get that full point?
Yeah, I think he's in play in DK. I think you can even run him as a cash guy at his price at 4.9 because the 49ers are great at stopping the run. They've still been that throughout the year. It's an interesting match because the way to beat the 49ers is with the vertical pass. And Washington doesn't do that, but they're really good against the run, and they make teams throw on them. And J.D. McKissick, with that game on Thanksgiving, not in that game against the Bengals, he's still from Alex Smith leads the team in target share. 26% of the team targets from Alex Smith, more than Terry McLaurin, more than Logan Thomas. 4.9 in a full PPR and against the team that's probably going to shut down, Peyton Barber falling down for a yard at a time. I don't see any reason to think that he won't be a solid floor play that can get you by. I like him outright more than Gio. I think when you look at Gio's situation, the one main thing that sticks out Gio is he's not catching passes. Since Joe Burrow's been out, he's caught 2 passes in each of the past 2 games. The offensive line just lost Jonah Williams. It's rough. And I understand that the matchup's there, but the Cowboys have hit us a few times. They made Dalvin Cook work for his yards a couple weeks ago. They had a couple games prior to that where they, against the Steelers, where everyone was on James Conner that week and he did nothing. Gio just it's a tough spot. I am not going to be coaxed into Gio. I might be wrong. Like if I was in a season-long league and you could tell me to flex Gio, I think it'd be fine. But I just don't see the upside here. Like he's not going to be a guy that comes out and gets like 130. I don't think. It's just real tough for me to get there for him. I mean, there are better people than me that will probably play him, and I'll probably look bad in hindsight because of how bad Dallas has been. But I think game script's going to work against him too. It's good. Listen, Dalton going back to Cincinnati.
Revenge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. But yeah, I like McKissick. Basically, what I'm saying is I like McKissick more than Gio.
McKissick also significantly outsnapped Peyton Barber 53-24, despite that being a close game throughout. So I think we can throw away the negative game script role if Antonio Gibson's out. I think McKissick is just the guy, pretty much.
Yeah, and again, I like the fact that game's being played in Arizona on the turf, kind of a sneaky positive for the teams as far as the offense. All right, Daigle, you got anything else as far as running backs? You want to open up some receivers for us?
No, I can open it up with some receivers. Not too many. Rich is typically pretty good at finding the cheapy guy for us to go after. Like he already mentioned, and we talked about in that game, I do love Corey Davis and in particular DJ Shark a whole lot this week. DJ Shark is one of my favorite receivers on the entire slate. Tyreek Hill, of course, really easy. 2 touchdowns negated last week. But prior to that, we talked about it, 30% target share in 3 of his past games. So just still
you can complain.
Targets,
so you can complain about the Tyreek's touchdown. I will allow people to complain about because he caught it. There was no penalty.
He didn't know he caught it.
Yeah, I mean, but you can complain about that, though. And the second one, no one's allowed to complain about because they cheated.
It was a tough sweat. I did not have Tyreek, and I was happy that both those did not count, but they were both pretty phenomenal plays for sure. Like you said, there was some holding, but that backflip though, that they should like offset each other or something.
But the backflip's not even good. Like he's not even getting around on the backflip. It's really weird.
You're knocking me on that back. Oh, the athleticism on that backflip was phenomenal, though. You're like the Russian judge giving like a 3.6 or something. You didn't like it?
I saw Naheem Hines do like I don't even know what the proper gymnastics term would do when he scored. Like Tyreek's got a high bar to get to that Naheem Hines. Like he's not even landing on his feet on the backflip.
Tyreek does get credit, though, for staring down the defense for 5 seconds before flipping. Like that's pretty awesome.
Style points, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So we're paying.
He knows how to build momentum. Also, really quick, Brandon Cooks as well. So if people are going to be down on Brandon Cooks, I still think it's a better matchup for Cooks than QT in this spot. QT, of course, led in target share, but Cooks, I imagine, Woodhead still leading targets, was second on the team right behind QT, 9-8, and also left, got evaluated for concussion. So if he plays a full game and everyone's going to be off him in this matchup, I still think he's a good player.
Was Chad Hansen a one-week wonder, or is he somebody that's worth looking at, especially in DK where he's 3.9?
I mean, anyone in that role.
I don't think
he's playing Will Fuller's position. We talked about it. QT was not going to be playing Will Fuller's position. Now the targets got dispersed in a different fashion, but we were on QT last week because of how much zone the Colts play. You have that much zone. That's why Waller's probably set up to have another pretty solid game again this week. I mean, the ball's going to go to the slot guy and these underneath routes because they play so much zone. So, I mean, it was set up for that. But, I mean, anyone playing Will Fuller's role attached to Deshaun Watson is, probably at least worth a look. I mean, it could be in hindsight, it could be a 1 week thing. But if he's going to get that kind of, snap usage and route usage attached to Deshaun Watson in that role, I mean, throw some bullets, man.
Hribar, let me ask you this. This is one of those Wednesday night questions we don't really know just yet, no clarity, but it's possible we have Carolina without DJ Moore. It's possible we have Carolina without Curtis Samuel. We know on the Denver side, they lost 2 of their key players in the secondary, 1 to injury, 1 for PEDs, I believe. So we can have Robbie Anderson versus an inferior secondary. Now, Denver collectively, generally, a defense I don't like to pick on. Fangio seems like a sharp guy, and he subdues, opposing offenses to some degree. But if that is the scenario, Robbie Anderson feels like a really, really strong play, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I had that kind of situation like earmarked to bring up because we don't know what's going to happen with Curtis Samuel yet as he was part of the contact tracing. He'll have to, clear protocols throughout the week with negative tests or whatever. But we've seen a couple times like that hasn't worked out for people like Adam Thielen or Brandon Ayuk 2 weeks ago. You might not get to come off. We know DJ Moore's out. So that leaves them with Brandon Zylstra and Pharaoh Cooper. So, I mean, and Robbie Anderson's already a guy that's been soaking up a ton of targets. throughout the course of the season. So yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why, if this plays out, even if DJ Moore's out, I think Robbie Anderson's a good play. And then added bonus if it's just Curtis Samuel, because they're scheming him stuff near the line of scrimmage anyway. It's not one of these situations where you say, well, he's the only show in town, they're just going to throw everything at him. The way that Robbie Anderson's getting his targets this year it doesn't really allow defenses to really overcompensate for that. And I don't think they will anyways. Even barring that, because even if we don't see if Christian McCaffrey plays too in that game, could be a whole bunch of moving things to keep your eye on it as we get into like Friday, Saturday, and see what's going on in practices. But I think that's absolutely a situation to earmark. Just the Seattle guys too. I mean, like I said, I mean Lockett's due for a slump buster too, man. Like he's since that 200-yard game, he's got 292 total yards the past 6 games. He's kind of due for a slump buster too. We know when he does have a slump buster, he usually goes big. And I know people have chased Lockett, and they're tired of hearing that. But I mean, like I said, I think that the Seahawks are going to throw a lot more than people, are for the way the projected point total suggests they will. I think they're going to have a hard time running the ball.
Is it possible that knee injury for Lockett that was reported like so many weeks ago is possibly lingering, because he's had like 2 monster weeks and everything else has been kind of sort of whatever? Right?
Yeah, that's stuff we never know, and sometimes you hear about that stuff after the season, or how much. Remember Odell last year? Like we didn't find out towards the end of the season. Like, oh yeah, this dude, like he's got sports hernia, like his groin is like detached. It's like he's been playing. Like sometimes we don't know the severity of this stuff or how it's impacting these players. We don't know. That's always stuff that we never know. So yeah, it absolutely could be.
I mean, Lockett last year, we didn't know about the flu for that 6-game stretch. So sure, of course he could still be playing injured.
Fire off some other receivers that are on your list there, John.
That's pretty much all I have, unless Rich has another one. I think I can just rattle off a tight end really quick.
Oh boy, you got one? Is it not Kelsey, or is it not Waller, or is it somebody else?
I will say he doesn't have the ceiling of those guys, but it's week 14. I'm sitting on the ground. If you're not playing Zeke Elliott and running it back with Drew Sample, what are we even doing here? Of course, we're getting the Cowboys linebackers, who we should attack every week anyhow. And Sample quietly leads the team in targets, tied with T. Higgins the past 2 games from Brandon Allen. T. Higgins, of course, is a great play also. But I think Sample is quietly as cheap of an option as he is. Leverage off of T. Higgins, because we probably shouldn't trust anyone from Brandon Allen. So if everyone's going to flock to T. Higgins, which is what it seems like early in the week with his ownership, I'll just play Sample at a position I hate to play every week anyways, and then we can play Zeke, and we can just all watch our lineups fail. It's going to be great.
AJ Green, by the way, officially the floor. He's officially 3K on DK.
So bad.
And I believe, Rich, this is your classic exercising. I think he was on the field for every snap last week, and he ran like 33 routes. 1 target. What is going on with the Cincinnati side?
Yeah, I'm curious to see, too, if people will want to play Tyler Boyd because of that fluky play. He only caught 1 of 4 targets. I mean, he ran just a simple, 1 yard. They ran a slant route, a slant flat combo, and just like no one tackled him. Like just, it was the longest receiving play of his career. Just a really kind of fluky touchdown that he got. And I'm real curious to see if people want to go back to that.
DK specific, by the way, Boyd is 4'9", Higgins 4'8". He's currently questionable. But like the Dallas side, just that game I'm looking at, it seems like there's some interesting receivers there just because price. Lamb is 4'8" for Lamb. Gallup is 3'8", perfectly fine for 3'8". Like if that's the thing that makes the rest of your lineup work, I think you can do worse. But just sort of throwing it out there.
You can always do worse.
Speaking of doing worse, Rich, can you see Drew Sample and raise John as far as your favorite tight end, or not favorite?
No way.
Somebody's worth talking about.
No, I can't. I don't think I can thwart the Drew Sample drop. We didn't talk about Eifert. He's kind of in that boat too. Like with Glennon's come over, he's gotten more targets too. But like, listen, I'm never gonna push back at anyone's punt tight end ever.
Do you have a gross one right now, or you're still sort of like kind of figuring out as the week is progressing?
Cole Kmet is still 2.9 on DK. He's getting a ton of burn. Yeah. Got that little look near the end zone. I mean, the yardage really hasn't been there for him, but 2.9. Another one of those. Like, yeah, you could do worse at the position. I mean, it's we talked about it though. Like, if Kelsey's on a slate, like he's kind of hard. Like it's worth, I think, paying up more for Kelsey and then punting a wide receiver 3 than I think inversely paying for a wide receiver 3 and punting tight end, because the punt wide receiver. So you just brought up Gallup at 3.8.
Yeah.
Gallup at 3.8 has a way higher ceiling than any of these guys we talked about, the Drew Samples, the Cole Kmets, and you get Kelsey, like a guy who's performing as a top 5 wide receiver at his price. So, I mean, I think that there's definitely a lot of, good game theory into just saying, I'm going to start punting wide receiver 3, especially on a site like DK, and start paying for Kelsey, as an inverse fashion of punting tight end.
Yeah, I will say CeeDee Lamb has 5 end zone targets since Andy Dalton came back from injury, leads the team, but he's also dropped like 4 of them. So that's if you can hold on to him, that's kind of the sneaky play over Cooper.
He fits right in for the Cowboys. I mean, Jordan Reed revenge game is 3.5. That's a reasonable price. And Schultz is 3.5. Logan Thomas is 3.3. We at least have like some like decent prices for these guys. Some might be terrible, but at least I'm not having to pay like 4.7 for these names. So, and Kmet, It looks like he's taking up that role over Graham there in Chicago. Old man, Kmet's obviously the future there. And then I think he was the first round draft pick, if I'm not mistaken, there for Chicago. All right, let's step aside. Let's get out of here. We said it all for sure. This was the NFL Pick 6 show. It's John, it's Rich. If you guys are not aware, of course you're aware, but just tell them anyway. Rich, where can they find you as far as getting your content around, for NFL? It's all over the place, I know, but they don't know. Maybe they know. Who knows?
Yeah, sharpfootballanalysis.com, weekly worksheet. All my, content is there. Sharp Angles podcast with Dan Pizzuta and Cleve TA. And then every Wednesday here at 9 p.m. Eastern on Rendezvous with you guys in the Pick 6 show.
John, same deal, same question.
I can't top that one either, like Sample. But at NotJDaigle on Twitter, Rotoworld.com, Rotoworld Football Podcast, of course. Apparently this Sunday morning with Dean to break down DFS lineups. And it's week 14. If you're not following me and our stuff already, you're not going to. So hopefully you are.
There you go. For John, for Rich, I was Dean. This was RotoGrinders. Oh, the links can be dropped in chat one more time. Hey, what's up, YouTube? If you didn't do it before, feel free to hit the like button on the way out. Subscribe, turn on notifications. We have this tons of content as far as football and, of course, basketball. Lots of content right around the corner. You want to get yourself some RG content. $5 off your first month. The link's going to be dropped in chat for you guys. You get $5 off the Core 4. It's football, baseball, basketball, and golf. He was Rich. He was John. This was football. I was Dean. We're out of here. Holler.